Good morning and welcome to our session. My name is Renata Janini Dohmen, and it's a pleasure to be moderating this panel discussion with my distinguished colleagues. Here with us, we have Hongi Wenpun, Deputy Secretary at Singapore's Ministry of Manpower, and Ms. Eileen Tan, Singtel Group Chief Human Resources Officer. Eileen and Poon are co-chairs of the Ministry of Manpower's HR Industry Transformation Advisory Panel, of which we heard recommendations earlier this morning that we will explore further during the panel discussion. We also have Professor Annie Ko, Vice President for Business Development, V3 Group Professor of Family Entrepreneurship, and Professor of Finance at the Singapore Management University. We have with us Mr. Andrew Ng, who is Chief Operating Officer of the Lo and Behold Group, and Mr. Mayank Parekh, CEO of the Institute for Human Resource Professionals in Singapore. During this panel, you'll hear from different angles on how HR plays a key role for business and workforce transformation. We will talk about how HR has stepped up during the immediate COVID response and has helped businesses of all sizes navigate through these challenging times. You hear examples of what has changed and not changed for HR in light of the challenges this year, and what the lessons from the new normal have been. And finally, you'll hear what HR professionals must do to continue to develop professionally, to promote a culture of learning, and to be on top of their game. You can already start participating in the discussion by submitting your questions and comments via the chat for our Q&A in this session. If you have any specific questions for Eileen, please submit them early on. I will direct the first questions to her as she needs to leave the panel a few minutes before the end due to another appointment. So with that, let's get started. Poon, let's start with you. Can you share your views on how HR plays a key role on business and workforce transformation, and what you think has changed and has remained the same post-COVID?
Thank you, Renata. Before I start, maybe I'd just like to place on record my thanks to the HR Industry Transformation Advisory Panel, co-chaired by myself and Eileen, and actually made up of business and HR leaders from large companies and SMEs and even startups as well, and thought leaders. So I'd like to really thank you. It's been I don't know how to describe it. It's been a very eventful year. The HR tab was set up more than a year ago. Of course, we had a few months of discussion, BC, right? I call it BC, before COVID. And then COVID hit, and we then started to think about what should be different in our recommendations. So as I was reflecting upon the journey, I also think about what has changed and what has not changed in terms of our recommendations. So what has changed? Obviously, COVID has brought about a lot of disruption, and HR has had to lead from the front. For example, I'm quite sure many employees and businesses, they're constantly checking with the HR people, HR leaders, what to do, and the HR has had to step up. Right? Even IHRP and SXRRI, as the HR leadership organizations in Singapore, has been issuing advisories to the community on what to do and what not to do. And I thought that was very important. COVID also accelerated changes, things like working from home, or some call it remote working, digitalization of process, which we previously saw as necessarily face-to-face, like staff engagement. Has seen really some acceleration in terms of, well, it's no choice, right? We had to digitalize and accelerate some of these changes. Otherwise, the business wouldn't have been able to function. And HR, again, was at the forefront of that. So the acceleration was what changed. But what has not changed? If you look at the two main thrusts of the report, those have not changed. So the need so thrust one talks about the need for HR to be at the leadership, to be leading business and sector transformation, that still remains very important. So things like job redesign, digitalization that I mentioned, building skills even for automation, right? Even though automation is seen as maybe in a way competing for jobs, but actually building the capability, the HR capability for automation is also very important. Then the upscaling of HR, which is thrust 2 of our recommendations, I think not only remains important, it's become even more important because people are looking for leadership from HR. If you want businesses to transform and the upskill, people have the upskill, then HR has to lead in terms of upscaling itself. And I think that's become even more important, right? And the second thing about business transformation, more than ever, HR has to be at the front and center of business and sector transformation. And to me, it's an opportunity, because to me, COVID has not slowed down what we need to do. In fact, it has accelerated what we need to do, which is HR having to take a leadership role in terms of business sectors transformation. So I really hope that the HR community can take advantage of this opportunity to lead and to transform the HR community. Thank you.
Thank you. Eileen, I would love to hear your views on how HR has stepped up during its immediate COVID response, and what you believe from this experience HR should continue to do now and in the future. And maybe you can share some examples from Singtel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, everybody. I think the COVID-19 really has thrown all of us some new enlightenment, I would say, right? And whereby many of times, all the HR folks, in fact, we all learn how to execute, but in this COVID-19, we all execute to learn, because, it is really a very unprecedented times that we are living through at this point in time. And there were many imperfect experiments, and we have to actually turn around things fairly quickly. So if you think about the entire, during this period of time, in fact, what is actually very interesting was to thrive in this, what I deem as a new normal. Many of us at HR have to develop new muscles, right? The new muscles, whereby these new muscles actually, actually help us to thrive and execute a lot better during this period of time. And interestingly, as I think the HR folks, like what Poon was sharing with the participants over here earlier on, was that not just the HR folks got to build these new muscles, the HR folks actually became trainers as well. We are helping the rest of the organization to also build muscles, So overnight, every one of us become, like, in a way, gym trainers, okay? And we have to continue to build on it. And what we meant by that is that this is actually, if you think about, the launch of our report, actually is very timely, because it speaks to 3 very critical elements, to help us to thrive, all right, and sustain during this time. It's really, how do we use technology, all right, and increase the touch so that we can build a high trust environment, with our workers, all right? So you imagine this is really the era of what I call the high T3, whereby we have the high tech, the high touch, that we can have the high trust environment. And this is so critical. And in fact, the HR folks, during this is a time where I talk about the new muscles. If you can imagine, many of the digital tools that we spoke about, even in Singtel, right, whereby when we try to implement tools itself, it takes us about 1 year, or even 18 months to introduce a new digital or new tools to employee, and we have it faced. But entire COVID-19, you ask me, we all become digital overnight, literally over 24 hours. Everybody knows how to use Teams, everybody knows how to use Zoom. And if you think about it that way, the overnight digital deployment is actually, again, another new muscles that was being built. And who are some of the very key catalysts and key enablers to make it happen? I must say, interestingly, it is really the HR folks who is playing a very critical role to make it happen. At the same time, I think this is also a time whereby it has been very much a business as unusual. And given the opportunity, what we meant by that, think about from the HR perspective. In the past, many a times, you know, when we have to interview a candidate, we invite them over to a physical setting whereby the candidate got to take time off and show up for interview and they go off, right? And at the same time, you know, they come in and receive a paper offer, sign it, and we got to do a filing. But if you think about how during the entire COVID-19, like for instance, in the case of Singtel, we literally could leverage on all the different, you know, digital tools that we have put in place, including, you know, having virtual online interviews, all right, into going e-office, e-onboarding, everything is actually done virtually. Okay, that is actually very interesting. At the same time, the opportunity for us actually during COVID was also around stepping up digital learning. Okay, many of us were very, very fascinated, all right, with digital learning, online learning. But again, think about digital learning, how many folds, okay, we have actually increased in terms of the learning opportunity for employee. Like in the case of Singtel, for instance, we literally, you know, launched and went on an accelerated path of doing intensive training programs, all digital, all online, just during this period. And we have already surpassed, you know, all the learning places that we have done in any 1 year at this point in time. So I think there is really massive opportunity, you know, for HR folks, you know, to really think around how can we leverage on technology, you know, to do things and think about bringing experience very differently. And I think somebody actually also mentioned around mental health, okay? As we know, during this also period of time, it was very important to ensure that the mental well-being of our staff is being looked after, right? How do we bring people together? And everyone is actually quite innovative. And in our case, again, we actually deploy a new experience tool, okay, which is Quadrate, and we actually do weekly polling. We have never done that in such a frequent manner and study sentiments of our people so closely. And very importantly, the outcomes, outputs from those sentiments were analyzed on almost on the go, and we could actually implement and put in place interventions on the go as well. So if you may see a lot of the interesting, I think, technology plays and digitalization will very much talk about in the HR space with our employee setting. But during COVID-19, every one of us built additional muscles, you know, in terms of how we run the extra miles, carry the extra weights, okay? And I think there are many great opportunities, you know, that we should continue to make sure we sustain and bring it, you know, into what I call a more sustainable manner, including some of the, like I talk about online training, I talk about all the virtual way of working, and obviously the other one is actually telemedicine. We spoke about telemedicine for the longest time, but finally during COVID, we launched telemedicine, and it is also here to stay. You know, teleconsultation is here to stay actually post-COVID. So I guess the point I want to make, you know, to again challenge, you know, the HR community, and I think again, as if you think around the launch of our report this time around, it speaks to capabilities of HR, okay? How do we continue to play a very critical role in the entire transformation? And the entire report speaks to, again, is that the new role and the new skills and the new capabilities that HR need to equip ourselves with. And I think there are many great stuff that is actually, you know, has been in place and experimented, you know, by the HR community. And I would encourage everyone to continue that journey. And again, like I said, I mean, continue to experiment, continue to scale up. And I think we are really living in very interesting times.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen. And I really like the analogy that you made here. We're building new muscles, but we are also becoming trainers ourselves, right? And helping other people build muscles. We will touch a little bit on the high-tech, high-touch later on, because I think it's worth that we explore that a bit more. For now, Andrew, let me invite you into the discussion and ask your views on how the challenges resulting from COVID have allowed HR to demonstrate its strategic value in the SME and food and beverage space.
Thanks, Renata. And hi, everyone. Good morning. I think for SMEs, we've always seen HR as an operational function, and it's always very admin driven. But during this COVID-19, I think HR has really stepped up. They've had to step up. A lot of it is to do with employee engagement and simple things of communication. So I think Zoom has been a technology that we've adapted very quickly, as Eileen mentioned, and now we're doing monthly town halls, for example, that we would never have done before, because as a restaurant group, we have restaurants all over Singapore, we can never get everyone together. So in this case, we can now do monthly town halls, so we can build that trust and transparency with our employees. I think HR had to do a lot during COVID-19 because many companies SMEs had to do restructuring, where there's no pay leave. There's a lot of emotional support on that one side of it. But at the same time, there's all the things of looking at culture and employee engagement. And I think that's really important. As a company, we also set up a staff relief fund. And that was to help our employees that were retrenched, as well as employees that were still with us that were on no pay leave. And my boss donated a year's salary to set up the staff relief fund, and HR and a few of us from operations sat on a committee to look at how to approve the grants for the staff relief fund. So that was a great thing. And look at other aspects of HR that an SME may not normally look at. For example, look at benefits. What benefits can you help your staff with during the pandemic? So we ended up giving a discount program for our staff, 50% across all our outlets. Of course, online training became a big thing, especially for SMEs, because there were grants associated with that. And all the training providers were coming up with these great online training. But of course, the HR role is to ensure that we are working with the best training providers and not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry. So we had a lot of interesting ideas from HR. They really stepped up. We looked at other areas such as CSR. So we started a community kitchen at one of our venues, and we managed to rope in help of all our different restaurants in separate teams, so to avoid any cross contamination. And it was great. Everyone chipped in. Now people say, well, how come you're doing charity work when you're restructuring and giving no pay leave? And I said, well, luckily we had sponsors who sponsored all the ingredients, and all we did was the effort to prepare the food, pack the food, and then send the food out to the dormitories for the foreign workers. And we did 10,000 meals during circuit breaker. So that was a phenomenal thing. But again, HR stepped up. HR came up with the ideas. HR was really instrumental in this, and this kept the motivation of the team there. And even though we're a small team or we're SMEs, but they still have equally important role to play as they are doing in MNCs.
Okay. Sorry, my mute button. No, my mute button was not working. Now I'm back. Look, I think the cultural aspect that you have highlighted is incredibly important, especially in times as we lived, and definitely HR has a key role to play to ensure that we continue to be the custodians of the values of the company, and we bring that forward and remember people that is something that unites us, and that's a fabric to bring everybody together. Thank you, Andrew. Mayank, let's talk a little bit about the HR professionals themselves. Today, we are deeply impacted by and involved in COVID-related activities. Tomorrow, it might be something else. So in your view, how do HR professionals stay on top of their game and continue to lead change?
Yeah, so good morning, and thank you, Renata, for the question. I mean, HR professional bodies like us, we are committed to journey with HR professionals in managing the change, not just today, but in the future as well. And I think the change is, as what has been discussed already, quite apparent. The first area is really in terms of the hard skills around how technology can help unlock business value, and more companies are adopting technologies. So HR also needs to develop that digital acumen to know how technical skills fit into the workplace and how to make best use of people. And so I think that the whole area of technology also needs to be complemented with analytics. And that's another hard skill that we see HR professionals needing to get more and more familiar and more confident in using. And analytics is going to be critical in order to kind of help companies improve performance, whether it's individual performance, business performance, and also enhancing employee experience. So I think it's critical now that HR leaders progress from just anecdotal approaches to kind of convince our business leaders to more evidence-based thinking, providing more data, providing more decision science behind the recommendations that they are making. So in addition to some of the hard skills, I think it's also critically important that the profession needs to stay grounded on its human aspects, which brings me to some of the soft skills that we also see HR, having to get a little bit more, confident and familiar with. One is on change management. I think organizations invest in infrastructure, they invest in technology, and sometimes without investing in people and the change process. And this is where I think HR leaders can play an important role in enabling some of the agility that is required in the broader organization as they try to navigate through some of the changes that are coming up. And in addition to that, change is also the ability to influence, the ability to be a kind of an internal consultant to the organization, which I think is also critical as HR kind of look into reskilling the workforce. How do we convince workers to kind of pick things up, which may not even be apparent to them today, but this is something that could hit them 3 years, 5 years down the road. So your ability to influence, to have that gravitas within the organization to say, yes, this is something we must invest in, convince the management, and then having done that, also convince the workers, employees to say, this is something that's going to be good for you, not just your time in this company, but also your overall employment across across the lifetime. So, and finally, we are moving into a more and more globalized, multi-generational workforce. And this requires an inclusive culture. And that is another area where this is where HR's ability to pull the organization together, to provide that leadership, to have all talents feel that they are vested. They're vested in a common purpose, a common mission. This is another skill that we see HR having. So hard skills, soft skills, but the last skill is probably the most important skill is the business skills. Because for us to help solve business problems, HR needs to have a very intimate understanding of those problems. And they are complex. They are complex factors that influence business issues. And to find solutions, HR can add value by asking the right questions, thinking holistically about those problems, and above all, be curious about the business, and try to get as much of a voice into some of that business decision making as they can. So in summary, the hard skills are critical, as are the soft skills to stay grounded, but it is the business skills that really we see in IHRP that HR professionals need to get extremely competent in.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And I will come back to you, Mayanka, to understand a little bit how the Institute can then help the HR professionals gain and develop all these skills. But before I do so, let me bring Annie into the conversation as well. And Annie, we heard Andrew talking about culture. I would love to hear your thoughts about what we have learned to refer as to the new normal. And in your view, what are some of the aspects of this new normal that we need to consider from a HR perspective as well? And what are the implications in our field? Annie, I think you're on mute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you very much, Renata. I shall be quite short because I see lots of great questions coming up, and I think we should go to them pretty quickly. So let me first of all say it's been a great honor to be on this HR Transformation Advisory Panel. 2 years before this, I'm also part of the HR Sector Tripartite Committee. I think what DS said very early is the new normal too. The new normal is not the reboot, but it is actually a great reset. And I think we are right for the resetting at this point in time. To me, being part of this committee has allowed all of us to be focused on the first P, and that's people. Singapore, that's the only asset we have. We have no natural resources. And so people are the critical resource for the country. And therefore, coming together in a tripartite manner to look at the transformation of the HR sector focuses us on our people consciousness. The new normal implies also it's not about job-centric, it's about people-centric. And therefore we need partners. So that's my second P. I saw how Eileen and Andrew spoke so closely about working with all their organizational partners, the CFO, the CEO, the safety office, everyone. They are all your critical partners because you cannot transform an organization without partners. And then the last P to me is platforms. Going forward, the new HR role need to leverage on technology. We have been doing a little bit of that, but I think we could push the envelope and go further. And therefore, it's about people and machine collaboration. It's about people and automation and not being fearful about automation and then picking up the retooling and the reskilling and make it internal competencies that's within the company. So at the end of the day, no business can transform if you don't keep your eye on the people. And I think we are getting there. We'll get closer to it as we come together as a group. So no one has the answers, but we are continuing to learn, and we are hoping to learn also from the community of learners that have just signed up on this wonderful session. 300 people today waiting to ask all the right questions. Back to you, Renata.
Thank you, Annie. And one of the many hopeful key takeaways from this session, and I'll say it right now, people, partners, and platform, the 3 Ps that you have mentioned. All right, look, I do want to go back to some of the recommendations made by the panel. So we have heard some great examples along the first minutes here of this panel of how progressive HR practices can help business and workforce transformations to be successful. And earlier this morning, we heard from Senior Minister Zaki Mohamad a couple of recommendations made by the HR Industry Transformation Advisory Panel. So I would like to go back to the first recommendation here, and maybe this is a question for you, Poon and Eileen as co-chairs, but everyone please feel free to chime in. Would you elaborate a little bit more on the first recommendation, which was strengthening HR capabilities in organizations to support business and workforce transformation? What is the opportunity here, please?
Okay, let me just share with you around, our thoughts over here. If you think around the strengthening of the HR capabilities itself, obviously we have done quite a fair bit of work over the past many years, especially in terms of setting up the IHRP, as you know, and I'm very glad that through the entire efforts of IHRP over the last couple of years, we're able to bring about almost 2,700 of certified people coming along together, and obviously we set ourselves a very big target of 10,000 in the next couple of years, and bring the capabilities together, I think makes a big impact, because now It's really the HR community coming together, all right, banding together to also collectively, like what Annie was sharing, the 3P is coming together. So you have the HR community coming together, partnering each other, and leveraging on a platform, to continue to lift up the professionalism of the HR community. And it's very important, and you will see that we'll continue to work very closely with the HR community to develop all the various playbooks. Okay, I think the playbooks really make a big difference, as we can see. During the entire COVID-19 period, I think IHRP actually worked very closely with the HR community. Actually, it's a community that is being formed by tripartites, to come up with a COVID-19 response playbook for just the HR community. And I could see that many of them actually jump in and provide, put in the questions, and immediately you could see, again, the community coming together to share, all right, to share their views, to share their thoughts. And it was really extremely useful, especially during unprecedented times like this. At the same time, as you know, that we are also supporting the human capital diagnostic test. I think that is the HCDT. That's a very important initiative on our part as well, because this is actually would again provide a tool, right, to our HR community and organization, to kind of like assess, where they are at this point in time, and provide aspirations in terms of where you can get to. And that is very, very important. Where are the gaps and how you continue to step up? And I think that is also very important in terms of, supporting how do we continue to uplift. And obviously, we speak quite a fair bit around technology, just over the panel, I think shared around the importance of technology. And interestingly, I think as I brought up the point, which is, the high T3, and technology, I think, especially during this time, how we marry technology and the touch, all right, the human touch, which is what HR folks like us ourselves are very good at. Okay, we are very good at the touch aspect. We understand a lot more around empathy, understand the need, especially around the mental wellness of people during this time. But, marrying the component of the technology together with the touch, I think that's where you build a resilient and a trust, a trust and open organization, all right? We talk a bit about purpose, so those are all very important factors that you will see that we are playing a lot more. Of course, given the community is banding together, you're going to see very exciting things actually coming out from the HR community for the HR community, okay? And I think if you ask me, being a HR practitioner over the last many decades, this is almost one of the most heartening development that I've seen in our scene, all right? And I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot more of the HR folks banding together, right? Again, as that the one people, great partnership, and leveraging on this great platform.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think when I first joined Ministry of Manpower about 2 years ago, the phrase that I heard quite often from HR people, HR leaders was, we want a seat at the top management table. We want a seat at the table. Well, you are at the table. In fact, for some of us, no choice. By a click of a Skype button or Zoom button, boom, you're there at the top management table, and people are looking towards HR for leadership, for guidance, for direction. And it's not just for HR issues, what to do for safe management and so on. It's also about business transformation. Before this, I was the CEO of Spring Singapore, dealing with SMEs. And my observation was that many SMEs, they know, and many businesses, they know what needs to be done for transformation, right? There are no business secrets there. I mean, you read business journals, you just click on some websites, you know. Job redesign, digitalization, automation, all that. We know what needs to be done. The problem was how. And I figured after a number of months that the how centers very much on the human aspect. It's easy to buy a machine if you just can get the bank financing. But having people to train to maximize, to optimize the use of the machine that's relevant to your business now, that's not easy, right? And job redesign is almost a catchphrase you need to do. and digitalization is the same, but how do you do it? Getting consultants, maybe not 100% of the answer. You still need to develop the human capabilities to execute many of those productivity or business transformation plans. So I've come to the realization, HR really is at the heart of it. And I think businesses and business leaders through COVID have come to realize that fact. And I think for HR, HR community really have to take hold of this opportunity. And so some of the recommendations in Thrust 1 and helping companies to transform, tech sectors to transform, is about providing tools to HR, right? So like the data portal Mum has set up, in order for companies to study their own manpower profile compared to sector, compared to economy, and see how they're faring, help them to understand their workforce. I think that's very important. And HCDT, the Human Capital Diagnostic tool that IHRP is administering, again, help you to understand your people and what to do in order to transform your workforce. I think those are the tools that we're going to give to the HR so that you can grab this opportunity to transform yourself and to help your businesses. Thank you.
And Poon, I'm going to write on a comment that you made about HR having a seat at the board because it's very important, and it's very linked to one of the questions that we have here in the chat. By the way, we are getting great traction on the 3 Ps, and we see many, you see some comments of support here. But the question, and this is for the panelists, please, so feel free to jump in. The question is, what do you think has shifted in terms of leadership's relationship with HR? So the question is a little bit about how is the leadership, the other leaders, seeing HR? So what has changed? And then the next question is, how can we as HR professionals continue to change the molds here? And I think Mayank had addressed that, and we have addressed. But this one question is quite interesting, which is, how has this shifted? So anyone who would like to take this question?
Let the business people take the lead.
How the business, how the other leadership is looking at HR.
Yeah, let me take this one for SMEs. I think it's true. I mean, prior to COVID, maybe HR, like I said earlier, was more seen as an operational function in SMEs, and I think this pandemic really, I mean, especially in our industry, which is F&B hospitality, we're meant to be a people business. We're meant to be focused on hospitality, customers, and guests. And isn't hospitality also something that's internal? Isn't hospitality something we do for our people? And so technically, HR is hospitality to any company, anywhere. And a lot of that is to do with communication. A lot of that to do is with engagement. I think Maya mentioned about employee experience. That's really important. You talk about guest experience. What about employee experience? Mm-hmm. So we as a company always look at human capital or HR as internal customers. You know, if we're in hospitality, we're taking care of our guests, we need to take care of our internal guests. And who does that the most and best is the HR team. And they're the ones that have to drive that. And we all have a philosophy in our company is that if we want to take care of our guests, take care of our people first, then they'll naturally take care of the guests. And likewise, if you think that way, then, and you're people-centric as a company, then that's why HR becomes a driver of that, of those decisions, of those strategies, of those structure. Because no one else can do it in the company. It is HR that can do it. So even however big or however small your company is, you know, even if it's a small company, the HR has to have a seat at the table because it's about the people. If people create value for your guests or your customers, HR is the one that's going to help create that value for the customers.
Yeah, these are very, very good points.
Renata, can I just jump in?
Yes, please.
I think the great unknown creates that impetus. And I like the question that's coming up. So, you know, everyone don't know how to deal with the COVID crisis, and HR definitely becomes a centerpiece because it's about people. But I think HR also recognizes that if they are not partnering with the business units, if they're not partnering with the CFO, because there is also the job support scheme that's coming in, they cannot be deserving of a seat at the table. So I think HR on its own, by itself, should look at how could they be part of the team, the leadership team, and working with the CFOs, the COO, the CEO, and all the different LBU heads, because together, partnership, that's when you can power ahead. So this is the right time for HR to actually be part of it. And Eileen keep using the word step up, step up. So in many ways, all the CEOs are looking at their HR. And if you look at every speech that is coming up from the government about, okay, phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3, we have MOM there, we have Health Ministry there, and we have Ministry of Trade and Industry there. Why? Tripartite. You cannot step up on your own. But this is the right time to step up and step up in collaboration with both your organizational excellence team as well as the individual holistic member. So I think many of the questions are now saying, let's look at our people and not just look at them as a worker, but as a people with needs, so mental needs, physical needs, collaboration needs. Remote workers also need to feel like they are part of the whole organization. So how powerful is this? Having HR professionalized. That's when you connect all the 3 Ps. A professional HR person would understand people, partnerships, and platforms. So sorry, I just had to jump in here because there's such a great occasion for tying the pieces together. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, so look, we have been talking about upskilling. We have been talking about helping HR really see itself as a very strategic player, and being part of the leadership as HR is already. And that takes me to the second recommendation that was made earlier today, which was to equip HR professionals with emerging skills to be better prepared for tech transformation. So Mayank, this is where I'm going to go back to you and pick your brain here and ask what we can do to upskill HR at the speed and at the scale that is needed. What is the Institute's planning, and how is the Institute going to help uplift the HR profession?
Yeah, certainly. I think it sometimes can seem a little bit daunting to HR to kind of be thrust in this limelight. And certainly, I think it's going to take time as well for HR to journey with the organizations to actually upskill themselves as well as their workers. So I think this is where IHRP and the rest of the community and the ecosystem comes in. And so HR professionals don't have to think that they are alone in this. They have the help, they have the support from certainly the tripartite partners. There's a tremendous amount of support for training, a tremendous amount of support for HR professionals to understand what are the skills that they need to have in order to be effective in the future, and how they can help equip themselves and their organizations with those skills. So having a network, having a sense of community is critical for the profession to kind of build on their ability to partner and deliver on business results. And for IHRP, what we do is we bring that community group together in terms of the communities of practice. So whether you are passionate in the area of analytics, you want to know more about technology, HR technology, or you want to network with people around business partnership, strategic partnership, we will have the right communities that you can connect with and that you can learn from each other. I think a lot of the learning today takes place from one another, from peers. it's no longer just one way. It's how you can communicate, how you can contribute, and how you can take back. And this is really the success we've had with COVID, the COVID task force. This is where a group of HR professionals who were willing to contribute their time, volunteer their time, despite the fact that they were busy themselves, they're willing to contribute that time to help those professionals in maybe some of the smaller companies, some of the companies that were struggling with really trying to guide their organizations, and it's been a success. So I think we can do much more of helping HR professionals band together and to provide that support to each other. In addition, I think it's always we will have the tools such as certification, skill badges, and the HCDP that we talked about. These tools are important because I think this is where you can really differentiate yourself. You can provide that the organization with the value that it seeks, and the advantage of using some of these tools is that they are national tools. So you have an ability to benchmark your own organization, yourself, and your own organization with some of the national standards that are out there. So I think it's a lot of value for you to come forward to be part of a community like IHRP to provide yourself, provide your organization with the ability to leverage on the broader community's efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Mayank. Yesterday, during Professor Dave Ulrich's presentation, he said that one of the best things that we can do in HR is to lead the organization to be successful in the marketplace, and that a crisis like the one that we are living today offers many opportunities for us to create value as well. So an open question to all the panelists here. In your view, what is, besides everything that we have said, what is the value that HR can create in light of the crisis and also in light of other trends that we are seeing? For example, hyper-personalization of services, definition of work boundaries, etc. What else can we do? What other values that we can create in light of these trends and these movements that are happening today?
Okay, given that I have to step up the panel, like you said, HR folks have important things to attend to, and I really need to jump off to a very important thing that they cannot start a meeting without me on. So, but I will just maybe make an attempt to just if you don't mind, you know. I think is like just now you all were alluding, don't waste a crisis. I think that is so important. Why waste this crisis? So I think one of the HR things that we can do, if I may use the word, other than the reset, actually, this is really an opportunity, in my opinion, for big shift. It is an opportunity for a big shift whereby we can absolutely rethink and redesign the organization of teams and how do we optimize, you know, the current work arrangement. Because the current work arrangement, if you think about it, you have remote work and then you've got like office space and do you do a hub and spoke? Do you know, how do you imagine the kind of work and workplace and workforce? I think it's going to be a big shift, in my opinion. Okay, I don't have the answer. In fact, which is going back to my earlier point, right? In the past, we just have to learn through experimentation, and chances is very high we will make a lot of mistakes along the way. But very important, we must know how to reflect on the mistakes and quickly turn around and refine and be very agile, which is some of the key skills that's needed for the HR folks, right? And execute what I thought that I come as the new reality of work, that there is going to be a lot of new realities of work that we have to embrace. You know, there's new opportunity to think about branding, there's new opportunity to think about tools. I give an example, just case in point, right? I think somebody asked a question around, especially AI and data. And in fact, I was just challenging my team. I said that this is the magic time, given remote. What happened? Eileen Tan really cannot show up for work tomorrow, and you have nobody to approve, you know, your document. Who is going to do the approval? Because the approval was always delegated to me. But I said, imagine if you understand how I actually think around the approval, can you use AI to automate that kind of approval process that you don't even need to route to me, because you only route to me if it's an exception. Okay, so what I'm trying to articulate over here is that I think this time around it really calls for all the HR to think very, very differently around the role that we play, right? In fact, there's a big initiative that is actually going on, a bit of the cat out of the bag first, you know, that we are actually reviewing our body of competencies to reflect what I call the new paradigms, the huge reset that we talk about, whereby how we rethink about our role as strategic advisor. How do we think around, you know, job redesign, all right? Given the massive opportunities that's available for us to rethink around technology and role, and how do we retrain and reskill the people as a result of that? How can we make sure that we speak a lot about customer experience, you know, in the business world, but bring that concept into our world as HR? What is an employee experience designer looks like, all right? How do we think around culture and purpose, which is very important because that brings the people together. And of course, very importantly, during times like this, we all realize resilience is important. Authenticity is important. And how do we actually, at the end of the day, you know, be empathetic as well, with compassion, the care, bridge the concept that I speak a lot earlier on, you know, the tech and the touch and the trust. I think these three things are really, really very key. So I think with this, you know, I have to share with the team, I really got to go, you know, lovely to connect with every one of you. And thank you very much, you know, for the opportunity to share this with everybody. Okay.
So Eileen, thank you. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, and we'll see you around. But thank you for making the time to be here with us. Let me continue here, just because we're moving towards the top of the hour, and I do want to make sure that we cover one question that came from the audience here. We did talk about HR leading the change and being prepared. And we talked about other leaders also appreciating the fact that HR is building those muscles and having a seat together and partnering with them. But we have not talked about the employees adopting the change as well and adopting a mindset actually that would help them navigate through change. And that's what this question is all about. So the question is, while we are supporting people mindset change and organizational transformation, how about how people are adopting? How are they coping? So anyone would like to pick up this question? Any of the panelists? So the question continues to say, how can we ensure that employees support the change initiatives? Yes, go ahead, Mayank.
Yeah, maybe I can have a try at that. I think certainly for HR to be effective, we need to have the buy-in from the employees, and this is something that all HR professionals sort of need to kind of focus in terms of when they design programs, when they think about delivery of policies, how work needs to be organized around the company. I think the aspect of the employee experience is going to be critical in the future. And just like businesses have done so for the customer, increasingly I think they are going to do for the employee as well. So increasingly HR departments are developing the competencies around designing that employee experience and understanding what are the touch points, the critical touch points that matter to employees. And then once you have a good understanding of what those touch points are, and how do you kind of design your interactions with those employees in order to kind of make sure that that interaction is a positive one. It enables you to carry out objectives for the organization, and certainly that's also an opportunity for you to get feedback from the employee as well, in terms of, is there more that can be done? Is there something else that we probably didn't think of before that we need to think of now? So certainly, I think that's an important aspect, and it's part of that Eileen talked about, the refreshed body of competency that we will be releasing towards the end of the year.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, we have about 5 minutes, and before we wrap up, what I'd like to do is to ask each one of the panelists here about one positive lesson. There are many, and we have discussed many already, but one positive lesson that you believe our audience can take away, and a positive lesson from this, the experience that we've had this year. So one takeaway. Let's start with Andrew. Would you be okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I think one thing that I've always said about HR personnel is that they must never forget the human touch thing. That's something that with all technology coming on board and all sorts of structures and what have you, we mustn't forget those soft skills, or core skills as we call them, because when they lose the emotional intelligence, or they lose that human side of things, it takes everything away. So I do see a lot of HR professionals who sometimes trying to drive change and trying to do top-down changes, and it doesn't work. There has to be the buy-in, as Maya mentioned, and understanding, having empathy for what the employees are going through. And I think that has definitely happened during this COVID-19 situation, because everyone is not like it's one department having a problem or one company having a problem. It is the whole of Singapore having a problem, and every HR professional has to go back to why they want to be in HR in the first place, which I like to think is help people and make things happen and have good relationships with people. I think that's the thing that sometimes we may forget in the pursuit of change and technology and all that stuff. We forget about the human side of things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Annie, let's move on to you. Very quickly, one positive lesson. Are you on mute, Annie? Yes, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was hoping to get the last word, but I'm just kidding. So very positive already, this whole message and all the conversation. I think if we focus on the passion for people, we will get everything right. And so, the last P, be passionate. Even HR professionals, be passionate about your role, be passionate about your profession, and the wonderful, positive things you could do to touch lives. So I'll stay with that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mayank, how about your lesson?
I think it's around leadership. I think COVID has really brought HR to the fore and provided us with a tremendously strong platform in order to build upon. So let's kind of build upon this platform, provide the right competencies, equip ourselves, enable the organization to ride through the challenges ahead. And that way, I think it's going to be a virtuous cycle that as long as we continue to provide provide value to the business, we continue then to have that voice, that seat at the table.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of my takeaway.
Thank you, Mayank. Poon?
My takeaway is on innovation. For pre-COVID, my team was talking, I just think of two innovations that we did. One was on video link when we serve our customers in our service center. And I was thinking, what is the application for that? I mean, they're sitting in the same building, they're offering the video link to customers. And another innovation that the division was particularly very interested in was RPA, robotics process automation. And again, I said, okay, it sounds useful, but maybe its full application would come in the future. But boy, was I wrong, because when the COVID came, those two technologies basically saved our life, especially on RPA, because suddenly, overnight, we had to literally process tens of thousands of applications a day for re-entry into Singapore, for example, or people who were stuck overseas, or work pass holders who were stuck overseas. And without RPA, we would not have been, simply could not have been able to do it. So Clarissa had a question, SME innovation, day-to-day operations. My advice is the time to do innovation is now, not later.
Yeah. Thank you for all the lessons. So I wrote down empathy, passion, leadership, and innovation. Well, with that, I'd like to wrap up our discussion today. Thank you, our panelists, for sharing so generously this morning. I would also like to thank the team working behind the scenes here, who have worked with a lot of dedication to ensure that we all have the best learning and experience during the event.